A few years ago, I accidentally recorded the man following me through the woods, and I didn't even realize it until I got home. At the time, I had just moved to a quiet rural area to get away from the noise of the city. Every Saturday morning, I'd hike a trail behind my neighborhood that stretched deep into the trees and connected to a small nature park nearby. I used to record little videos on my phone whenever I found something interesting, like a hidden creek or a tiny waterfall. They weren't for social media, they were just a personal way to document the silence. After a few weeks, those woods started to feel familiar, almost comforting. I grew used to being the only person out there, and I eventually began to view the isolation as a sanctuary. But on this specific Saturday, the atmosphere shifted. I remember walking through the trees feeling unusually tense, like the air in the woods had suddenly grown heavy. Every sound made me stop. Branches snapping, leaves moving, even the wind sounded off. Without even realizing I was doing it, I kept looking behind me. Eventually, I reached a swampy clearing. It wasn't particularly beautiful, but the open space felt peaceful compared to the dense trees. For the first time all morning, I felt like I could finally breathe. I pulled out my phone and recorded a quick clip, just talking about the area and how weirdly anxious I'd been feeling on the walk up. I couldn't explain the fear at the time. I just knew that every nerve in my body was suddenly signaling that I was no longer alone in those woods. I headed toward the public trails, eventually stopping at the restroom near the parking lot. I figured being near the park entrance would make that feeling of being watched go away. But as soon as I stepped outside, a man stepped directly into my path. He was wearing a black hoodie, a purple hat, and dark sunglasses, even though it wasn't sunny. "Hey there," he said. He sounded way too confident, speaking to me with a level of familiarity that felt completely wrong. I laughed awkwardly and tried to walk past him, but I immediately heard his footsteps closing in behind me. When I turned around, he just smiled and told me he was taking the same trail. There is a specific kind of dread that hits when a stranger refuses to let you walk away. Even with the parking lot nearby, I felt more cornered than I had in the deep woods. My instincts were screaming at me to get away. I lied and told him I was waiting for someone, that I wasn't hiking alone. He didn't even blink. He immediately changed his story, claiming his car was broken down and he needed my small fingers to help him unlatch the hood. That's when the trap became obvious. He pointed that way to show me his car, but he was pointing toward the dense woods. The actual parking lot was in the opposite direction. Thankfully, a couple walked by a moment later. Without thinking, I walked straight up to them and started talking like we were old friends. I could see the confusion on the woman's face at first, but then she looked at me and immediately understood. The man stood there for a second, watching us to see if I'd fold. Then he finally turned and walked to a small red sedan in the actual parking lot and drove away. By stepping into that couple's circle, I was no longer an easy target. He couldn't get me alone, and the moment he realized that, he gave up the act. I practically jogged home. Later that night, safely inside, I started looking through the videos I had recorded earlier that day. I replayed the clip from the swamp clearing, the one where I was talking about my unexplained anxiety. My heart stopped. There, standing in the trees directly behind my shoulder, was the man in the purple hat, motionless, watching me. That clearing was deep in the woods, nowhere near the public restrooms. He hadn't just run into me at the park. He had been tracking me for miles. The weight of that discovery stayed with me for weeks. The realization that for hours, while I was admiring the scenery and recording my diary, he was the only one actually watching. I called the police that night and showed them the video. They searched the trails and the parking area, but they never found him or the red sedan. I completely stopped hiking alone after that. About a year later, the memory of those woods felt so tainted that I moved away from the area entirely. If you ever get that feeling that something isn't right, even if you can't see why, listen to it. Your natural instincts often notice the danger before your eyes are willing to admit it's there.